A confirmation regarding the audio, please, guys. If you're able to hear me out correctly and perfectly well, kindly confirm the same. Thank you very much. Okay, so the audio is all clear. So, hello, a very warm good evening to all of you, and welcome to Byju's Exam Prep. Welcome to today's webinar, where we shall be talking about the mains based current affairs, particularly of GS Paper 3. Right? That is, we are going to cover sections which have been in current affairs in news for the past month in the areas of environment and ecology, as well as science and tech, which shall be relevant for your mains examination. And when I say relevant for your mains examination, does not mean that you don't need to study it unless and until you have cleared the prelims. When we say that mains based current affairs, that means these are the topics where you need to have a deeper analytical understanding of the various issues, and you should also be able to find out the relevant solutions wherever the issues emerge. Having said that, the topics that we are going to cover today, few of them are going to be relevant even for your prelims preparation. And wherever possible and wherever it is needed, I shall be pointing out that this particular fact or this particular data pointer is going to be relevant for your prelims. And accordingly, while carrying out your revision, you can justify and in a way consolidate those materials in order to achieve a better preparation standard. So today we are going to discuss topics both from environment ecology as well as from the portion of science and tech. Now, before we take a look at the topic, a brief announcement regarding the prelims test series. I hope and I sincerely suggest all of you to be appearing for the prelims test series and the tests which are being rolled out to you. Now, these tests are for your benefit, regardless of whether you are appearing for the prelims examination this year or next year. These prelims test series, they become a crucible in order to judge your level of preparation and in order to understand where and what more do you need to study and what more do you need to concentrate upon. So I urge and suggest each one of you to actively participate in the test series in order to better your performance in the prelims exam as well. Now, having said that, without further ado, let us take a look at the topics that we are going to cover today. So today we are going to cover Geoheritage Sites Draft Bill. Now, this draft bill that has been in discussion because of the recent findings of the dinosaur eggs. You must all have heard about the fact that recently a lot of dinosaur eggs have been found in the state of Madhya Pradesh. So after that, this draft bill has been talked about. It has still not been introduced in the parliament. It is a long way from being introduced in the parliament. We are going to discuss about this. Then we are going to discuss about the PM Kusum Yojana. This is very, very important and relevant in your GS paper 3 because this deals with agriculture, sustainability in agriculture, sustainability in terms of utilization of water resources as well, because we know that you have a lot of underground water depletion which is happening across the country. So the PM Kusum Yojana becomes very relevant. Then we will discuss about the Ladakh's first bioheritage site, that is Yaya So. Now here, in the garb of YAYASO, we shall be discussing about what do we mean by bioheritage site, its relevance, and so on. Then we shall be discussing about the ethical concerns revolving the issue of ChatGPT. ChatGPT, as most of you would be aware, is an artificial intelligence powered tool which helps you have an interactive kind of session or a question and answer of sorts, and thereby you get answers from the chatbot. So that is something we are going to discuss about the ethical issues and the ethical challenges. And eventually, we are going to focus upon one of the important new inventions which have come into place, and that has been brought about by IICR Pune, whereby a crucial new material has been developed in order to combat and remove water pollution. So that is something that we are going to discuss, and why it is relevant in Indian context when we talk about water pollution. That is again something we are going to discuss. Now, along with each of the topics, at the end of it, we shall also be discussing one mains type question. I shall be giving you a broader framework about how to approach those questions and how can you weave your answers accordingly. And I suggest all of you that once you have revised all this, I would urge you to kindly try to write those answers, regardless of whatever stage of preparation you are in. Try to write an answer, get it evaluated, get the feedback, and improve accordingly. So, without further ado, let us introduce ourselves to the first topic of the day that we are going to cover, and that is geo-heritage sites and the geo-relics draft bill. Okay? Now, this much basic information and understanding, I am sure all of you must be having, that when we talk about a draft bill, this has obviously not been enacted. If anything has been enacted and passed by the parliament, I hope that we are aware, after that it becomes an act. So this is something which has still not been introduced in the parliament. It is still in the drafting stage, where till recently the government had opened up the portal in order to gain feedback from the general community, from the public and the public reaction at large about those bills and about the provisions contained in this bill. Now there shall be a lot of deliberation going upon regarding how to shape this bill in order to make it more effective, and then it will be introduced in the parliament at a later stage. But here we shall be discussing about the provisions included in this draft bill. We shall try to understand why is it that many people in the scientific community are absolutely concerned about this bill and what should be the way forward. But we will also take a look into what do we mean by geo-heritage site and what is the meaning of geo-relic. So we shall be analyzing these as well as we move along. Okay, so when we talk about the draft bill in itself, when you introduce any bill to be passed by the parliament as an act, there has to be a purpose, there has to be a larger objective behind this bill. Now, as I told you in the initial stages itself, that you would have come across the news story that in the recent past, that is in the past few weeks, if you look at the news, you had a lot of dinosaur eggs, right? And that too of the species name that is Titanosaurus, one of the larger dinosaurs which used to exist. So these dinosaurs' eggs, where were they found? In which state of the country were these dinosaur eggs found? Let me see. How many of us are aware about it? Very good. It was found in Madhya Pradesh. Very good. And the age of these fossilized eggs is estimated to be in between 100 to around 66 million years ago. Right? So roughly in the era before the Himalayas started building themselves, before the India that we see today, that we identify today with, India was not in its own position that we see today. India was very much a part of the southern hemisphere, and the Indian landmass in itself moved to the northern hemisphere, and the collision happened with the Eurasian landmass, which has led to the formation of the Himalayas as we know about. So that formation and that collision of the Indian landmass had happened roughly around 60 to 65 million years before present. So these dinosaur eggs which have been found, they tell you that the dinosaurs, large number of dinosaurs used to exist in this time frame before the Indian plate came into its present position. Now, how is this finding related to the draft bill that we are going to talk about? So the concern is very simple. If adequate and proper protection is not provided to geo-heritage sites and geo-relic sites, thereby we are basically risking the vitiation of these sites, whereby we are also risking that these sites, they can eventually get disturbed, these sites can get destroyed, they can be plugged away, and so on. There can be newer construction going on, and in a way we are going to lose our geological heritage. So that is why protection needs to be provided. But then, what do we mean by geological heritage? We do know what do we mean by heritage. But what is geological heritage? And what do we mean by geo-relic? So think about it. Indian landmass has been created and is in the process of creation and formation for millions of years, if not billions. In fact, in the year 2021, few of the scientists had also worked upon finding upon the fact that few of the areas in India, for example, the Chota Nagpur Plateau, they can easily form one of the oldest land masses across the globe. Right? Think about it. The first landmass to have emerged on planet Earth, that is still apparently present in India. So that is our geological heritage, right? That is our geographical heritage. And over a period of time, there have been multiple different changes, multiple different activities which have shaped the country in the present form that we see today. There have been numerous volcanic eruptions. There have been numerous different types of organisms which have come in, left behind treasure troves of data in the form of fossils and so on. So that is our geological heritage. That helps us understand that how the land has come into formation. Many of the volcanic deposits give us an idea that how much of volcanic eruption would have happened in this area and what kind of eruption would have taken place. Because obviously today in India, at least in the mainland, other than the region of Andaman Nicobar, we don't observe in the mainland any volcanic activity or any significant geological activity. So that is why this geological heritage of our country, which helps us understand the genesis of the country, which helps us understand the modification of the country, that and the preservation of that becomes absolutely important. So basically, the bill is aimed at providing for the declaration, preservation, protection, and maintenance of geoheritage sites and georelics of national importance for geological studies, education, research, and awareness purposes. The Geological Survey of India, that is the one which declares the sites as geoheritage sites or national geological monuments for protection and maintenance. Now, here, how do you discern what is important for your mains, what is important for your prelims? So here you find a subtle sentence that GSI is responsible for designation. So in prelims, you can always expect a question regarding where is it, or the GSI that comes under which ministry, when was it established, etc. So that is why this is the particular portion which will be relevant for your prelims purposes. Okay, so Geological Survey of India, this is the one which was established in 1851, right? And it lies under Ministry of Mines as of now. So the Ministry of Mines, whatever research, whatever data it has to furnish, that is done by GSI. So GSI lies under the Mines and Mineral Ministry. Okay, so here that is where the sites are designated as geo-heritage sites. Now, basically, here you get a definition of it, right? Most of you need a definition rather than the understanding purposes. So here you have the exact definition of what do we mean by geo-heritage and geo-relic sites. So basically, geo-heritage here refers to the geological features which are inherently or culturally significant, offering insight into Earth's evolution or history to earth science, or that can be utilized for education purposes. So this also talks about a kind of a geological inheritance, the geological evolution, the formation, etc. For example, let us take a look at it. Let us understand it, that when we talk about evolution and formation, and continuously I'm repeating that, what do we mean by it? So the image that you see, this image is here, if you have to notice the shape of the rocks. Notice the shape in which the rocks are situated. Now, I'm sure you would be basically observing something very unique in the shape and the size that the rocks here have. Any guesses regarding where this is, or in which part of the country do we have this? Any guesses? Yes, these are columnar shaped rocks. Okay. Soumya and Zubin, you are correct. So it is basically in Karnataka. You have the St. Mary's Island. St. Mary's Island, where off the coast of Karnataka. If you ever do get an opportunity to visit here, you should visit here. It is a beautiful place. But here, basically, if you take a look at the shape of the rocks, that is very unique. It has got a kind of a columnar shape. In many of the places, those columns have their own pentagonal as well as hexagonal shape. Now, Why is it that it is unique? Because in majority of the volcanic eruptions that you come across, you'll find that the molten material or the lava which would have erupted, that would have simply spread over or accumulated over a region. Here you basically come across the fact that how the magma, as it would have risen up, that is how it would have solidified eventually, and that is where the surrounding materials would have eroded away and weathered away, and now you are left with this unique kind of rock formation. Now here, the very interesting part of it is, observe where it is. It is in Karnataka, off the coast of Karnataka, so across the western coastline. Now, if you notice the rocks which are present in Madagascar, in Africa, right? If you observe that across the region of Madagascar, you will also find the rock formation which are absolutely very similar. So that tells you what? That gives you an idea that at one point of time in India's geological history, Madagascar was joined with the Indian mainland, and Madagascar basically was connected to the western coastline of India. Right? That is how we get an idea about the geographical and the geological evolution of a region. So if the same rocks are present there, and the same rocks are present here, having the same age, the same shape, and the same formation as well, that helps us to put the puzzle pieces together and helps us understand the evolution of the Indian landmass. So that is why this is a geological heritage site, right? Because it gives us an idea about the evolution. Few more examples. Observe here on the screen to the right side, you will observe a kind of a rock formation. Right? Now here I want you to observe the layering of these rocks. The layering of these rocks. Now what does this layering indicate? First of all, where is this situated? So this is basically again another geological heritage, and it is very good. It is situated in Lal Bagh, Bangalore, or Bengaluru rather. So here you have basically lava deposits. These give you an idea about how the volcanic material or the molten lava would have spread itself into various layers. And that tells the story about the southern peninsular part of the country, that what would have happened and how this peninsular plateau would have been created. So this also talks about the evolution of the landmass. So that is why these gneiss formation, the rock types that you see here, the rocks, they are basically gneiss. Right? So these gneiss formations that you see, that gives you an evolution of the landmass in the Peninsular Plateau, more particularly so in the Karnataka Plateau. If you take a look at the image on your left-hand side, this is basically the region of Varkala, where in Kerala. Now, Varkala in Kerala is known for one of the very unique things and one of the very unique features that it has, and that is the presence of sea cliffs. Now, these sea cliffs that you observe, what do we mean by cliff? Cliff is an area whereby you will observe that the land has got a sudden presence of a height gradient. This is what you observe as a cliff. Right? So Varkala is one of those unique areas in our country where you have the presence of sea cliff. You don't have sea cliffs across a lot of areas in our country. And the presence of sea cliff in itself gives you an idea about how old this region is, because this has been formed as a result of multiple processes of erosion and weathering having simultaneously and at the same time the subsidence of the land, where some part of our western land has gone underneath the region of the Arabian Sea. So this gives us an idea about the formation of landmass, the evolution of the landmass across the western coastline again. So this again becomes the geoheritage site. So wherever this evolution is being talked about. The formation of the landmass is being talked about, which gives us an idea about the process of formation of the landmass, the process of evolution at our geological past. That becomes a part of it. Now, another example that I give before you, I'm sure most of you would be able to guess what it is. Where is it and what it is? Very good, beautiful. This is basically the image of Lonar Lake. No, it is not a caldera, guys. Lonar Lake in Maharashtra. Very good. Now, this unique lake that you observe here, how this lake has been created. So this is basically a kind of a crater lake. Crater lake, which has been created as a result of a celestial collision whereby a meteor or a meteorite would have crashed upon the Earth's surface, thereby creating this kind of a depression. So that also gives you an idea about the minerals which would have been brought about from the outer space. And you get the presence of these minerals in the regions immediately surrounding the lake. That is why a couple of years back, it made a lot of news headlines when the water in this lake suddenly turned pink. Right? It made national headlines and global headlines as well. And that was because of the basic purposes that, and why the water here turned pink was because of the very simple reason that due to a lot of minerals which are present here, you have the growth of certain microbes and microorganisms which end up providing that coloration. So that is why this also becomes relevant in the geological evolution. So that is why Lonar Lake in Maharashtra also becomes an important geoheritage site. So that is where we have the aspect of geoheritage site. So these need to be protected or not? Absolutely, yes. These need to be protected. So when you protect them, how do you protect them? That is where you bring out the bill. Okay, so that is what it is talking about. This draft bill talks about it. So what is the need for the bill? So due to the absence of any legislation in the country for the protection, these are, that is, what do we mean by these? That is geoheritage and georelics. By the way, what is the difference between geoheritage and georelics? The difference is absolutely abysmal, very minute. Relic refers to something which is left over, the remnant, right? So, for example, here, if you get fossil remains, right? For example, dinosaur eggs that we were talking about, that will come under georelics and geoheritage, obviously, which give us an idea about which has our geological heritage and geological evolution entrapped in it. That is geoheritage. So both of them end up indicating almost the similar thing, but there is a tiny and a minute difference nonetheless. So due to the absence of any legislation, these, that is geoheritage and georelics, they are increasingly threatened with destruction, not only by the natural causes of natural decay, where naturally some of the rocks, they get decayed over a period of time. So that natural decay also happens, but at the same time, due to the anthropogenic conditions, population pressure, extension of agricultural practices, housing, urbanization, etc., due to that, many of these sites, they are threatened. So we don't have an absolute legislation or a law which has been made in order to protect these sites. So that is why this bill becomes relevant. Now let us take a brief look at the provisions included in this bill, which has created a lot of concern. Now please understand, by the time that this bill is going to be introduced in the parliament, there would be certain changes which would be made based upon the people's feedback which has been submitted to the government. But till that point of time, what are the relevant provisions around it? Let us take a brief and a quick look about it. So first of all, it would authorize the central government to declare a geoheritage site to be of national importance. So central government will have the all expansive power. Now, This would be under the provisions of right to fair compensation, transparency in land acquisition. Basically, in short, the Land Acquisition Act of 2013, based upon those procedures of the Land Acquisition Act of 2013, these lands, wherever you have these geological heritage, these lands would be procured. Okay, so through a public notification in the official gazette, right, the official government paper which comes out, the government would spell out what are the areas which are required to be acquired by the government. The objections to these can be raised within 2 months. For example, suppose an area in Madhya Pradesh. Tomorrow, the government says that this is an area of geological heritage. We have to acquire it. So, government will first of all issue a notification. It will publish it, publicize it in the official gazette. If you have any issue with that, let's say you have your house present in that region, you can raise your concern within the time span of 2 months. Okay. Now, provision is made for compensation to the owner or occupier of the land who incurs a loss or damage from the land, acquisition of the land. Now, whatever rates are going to be paid, that will depend upon the market rate at that point of time, as per the provisions of the Land Acquisition Act of 2013. So this bill imposes a prohibition on construction, reconstruction, repair, or renovation of any building in that area, or utilization of such area for any other manner except for construction, for preservation and maintenance of that site. What does that mean in simple terms? That means in that area, you cannot carry out construction activities. You cannot simply go on and repair a patch of road in that area unless and until it is to help you reach that region or it is carried out by the government. So all the various activities shall be brought to a kind of a cessation. Then after that, the central government is authorized to declare the area around each of these sites as prohibited area and regulated area, and their extent, that which is the area, or what is the extent of the area which is prohibited or restricted, that extent is variable. Okay, so in certain cases, that unless and until that is declared by the government, that is for a specific site, the area of 100 meter around that site shall be prohibited area, and the area of 200 meter around that site, that will be a regulated area. Remember this. This is 100 meter, that is prohibited, and here 200 meter, that is regulated. If in mains examination sub questions come, even if it has not become an act, yes, in mains examination you get questions from draft bill as well, my dear friends. So that is why we are discussing it. Okay, so we have seen what kind of construction activities will be carried out in this region. Most of it is prohibited. Penalty shall be declared for the destruction, removal of materials, of structures from that area, and the penalty has also been decided in this draft bill. So on the prima facie, on the face of it, it appears to be absolutely logical and absolutely important. Then what are the concerns? Why is it that everybody is concerned about this draft bill? That is because of the significant amount of power that is provided to the Geological Survey of India. Geological Survey of India. So, enormous amount of power has been provided to the GSI. Now, this Geological Survey of India is the one which will identify which is a geological heritage. It will notify as well. It will clear the area as prohibited and regulated area as well. So everything is in its power. What does that mean? And why is it bad? It is concerning because when GSI will get all the power, then independent investigators independent investigator investigators and researchers, their role has been reduced and their accessibility in these areas also significantly is reduced. So that basically curtails various different universities, professors, etc., research fellows from carrying out the research unless and until GSI is convinced. So that automatically can bring about a lot of bureaucratic system in the place, slow decision making, corruption in certain cases can also emerge. So what the various different people and stakeholders in this region, all of them, what they are demanding is that let us establish a national authority of sorts, national, let's say, geoheritage authority. And they are demanding that it should involve various experts from the private sector, from the universities, the researchers, independent researchers, and GSI should be a member of that authority. And together they should decide how the research work should be carried out, where it should be carried out, which are the areas which need notification, etc. So they are demanding a more democratization or a kind of a more decentralization, so to say. Decentralization will be the correct terminology here. They are demanding a more uniform decentralization of this entire thing so that everyone is able to participate. Now, when you will acquire land in an area, that will automatically present the acquisition issues in front of itself. Land acquisition, as we are all aware, is one of those tingling issues in our country, which has the propensity to, in a way, slow down various infrastructure projects, be it the very famed expressways or the highways or the bullet train project. All of them have suffered a setback because of land acquisition. So land acquisition is going to be a very difficult task when we talk about the designation of these regulated and protected areas. And local community in many of these areas, they should be brought on board that, okay, this is the area that we are planning to conserve. What is your input? What are your suggestions that how can we bring about a proper conservation? So that should be done, right? So this basically gives you an idea about what needs to be done. So what needs to be done? First of all, decentralization. Decentralization. Okay. Then, right, participation of the local community, and a kind of a transparency in land acquisition. Right? Then you need to carry out proper resettlement or rehabilitation of local community as well. Right? So that is where this is a kind of a way forward. Okay? So overall in this topic, what is it that we have seen? We have basically seen what do we mean by geoheritage sites, right? Why is there a need to protect them? Why it is in news? What is the context of it right now? What are the provisions of the draft bill? What are the concerns regarding the draft bill? And what needs to be done going ahead into the future? All of that we have seen here. That will be more than sufficient for any of the mains answer that you are going to write. So the type of a question, a typical question that you can expect from this area: what are geoheritage sites? Discuss the potential of the geoheritage and georelics bill in ensuring preservation of these sites. So it is a 250 worded answer that you are required to create here. So how do you write it? So in the introduction part, please ensure that in this you write the definition of it. Definition of the geoheritage sites and the georelic sites. What are these? Give the examples. We have talked about few of the examples ourselves, right? We have talked about 4 to 5 different geoheritage sites in India and their examples. So give the examples of them. Then in the main body portion, that is where you talk about the draft bill. Okay? Here you talk about the draft bill, you talk about the provisions. See, when you talk about the potential here, you have to talk about the positive outcome that it can bring about. At the same time, here you can talk about, right, first of all, a couple of sentences about what we have talked about as the need for the bill, right? Then after provisions, talk about the concerns or challenges. Then after that, you talk about way forward. And eventually, you bring about a conclusion. Very brief conclusion, around 10-15 words or 20 words at max in this case, that why it is important. It gives us an idea about our past, and it also helps helps us to understand what the future is going to look like. It is used for educational purposes, etc. All that you can briefly touch in the conclusion portion. So that basically concludes this particular topic, very important to the examination perspective. Okay. Now, a couple of questions. Why giving sole power to GSI raise much concern if adequate? See, this question is asked by Villapil. Please understand that, see, GSI, if it has been given power, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. Here, many of the people, they are individual investigators, the individual researchers, what they fear is that once the monopoly of GSI comes in, then they will never be made a participant. That is their only issue. See, if GSI would have been a top-notch research organization and everything would have been efficient, maybe not many people would have raised their concerns. So that is the concern which is being raised. Let us see what route or what path the government takes moving ahead. Okay? Now, then we come across to the second topic of the day, very, very important for your agriculture portion as well. This is important for your agriculture. The portion of agriculture as well. That is PM Kusum Yojana. Now, PM Kusum Yojana is not something which is very new. Then why are we discussing about it under the portion of current affairs? That is because PM Kusum Yojana has been provided an extension for a few more years. That is because of the fact that during the COVID pandemic, this PM Kusum Yojana was actually introduced in order to make agricultural irrigation much more efficient, much more effective, and it was launched immediately before the time of the pandemic. So during the pandemic years, the implementation could not happen so significantly. So that is why this has been extended in order to ensure that the implementation takes place across the country. So in this topic, let us first of all understand that what is this PM Kusum Yojana? Why is it needed? And also the provisions of it. So basically, if you take a look at the context and the background, the government has extended the PM Kusum. Here, Kusum is also an acronym. So Pradhan Mantri Kisan Urja Suraksha Evam Utthan Mahabhiyan, that is the full form of the Kusum scheme. It has been extended up till the financial year 2026, as its implementation was severely impacted and affected due to the pandemic. The center had launched this scheme in 2019, way back in 2019, and the purpose of it was to improve the solar capacity of 30,800 megawatts by around 2022. Obviously, this has not been achieved. The government had planned to infuse close to around 35,000 crore of funding into the scheme. Now, here, when we talk about this, so those of us who are not aware that how in agriculture, why are we talking about the infusion of solar panels? Why are we talking about solar power? let me be very clear. This is about the process of irrigation. What process of irrigation are we talking about? So I'm sure most of you are aware that which is the most widespread method of irrigation used across the country. When we talk about the entirety of the country, which is the mode of irrigation which is most widely used? What do you think? Very good. You have the wells and the tube wells. So tube well is the most widely used method of irrigation and providing water to your farmland. And what do you do in your tube, in a tube well? You have a motor or a pump set which in a way pulls water from the underground level and then provides it to the field for irrigation and provision of water under general circumstances. Now these electric motors that we have, how do they operate? So they will require energy. Where do they get that energy from? They get that energy from electrical supply, right? Electricity which is provided. So tube wells run on electricity provided by the state government. At the same time, few of the tube wells that you have, they also run on certain fossil fuels. So they can run through diesel as well. Diesel operated as well. Okay. Soham, irrigation through canals is more sustainable. Not always so, my dear friend. Irrigation through canals is not always sustainable. There are certain issues when you are a tropical country. See, temperate nations can have canals. Rate of evaporation is less. In tropical country, the rate of evaporation is so high. In the case of canals, water simply ends up evaporating. So these tube wells, they operate either based upon the electricity provided by the state government or they are diesel operated. In the case of the diesel operated ones, they will carry out a lot of pollution, right? Lot of pollution is done. And in the case of electricity, they consume a significant amount of electricity, right? Because majority of the state governments, they ensure that electrical supply is provided to the farmlands, because please understand, majority of our population is rural, and majority of our population, more than 50% of the population, is directly or indirectly associated with agricultural sector. So that is why the state governments, they ensure that the agricultural electrical supply, that is not hampered. And in a way, that electricity which is provided to the farmers, these are heavily subsidized. Heavily subsidized. So in a way, for every unit of electricity which the government provides to the farmers, the government incurs some amount of loss. And why is it? Because that electricity is provided at a very cheap rate or almost free in certain states for the agricultural or the farming community. So in a way, it creates loss to the state government when these pumps or motors operate. So in order to make it more sustainable, there has been a lot of talk about how to move these operations away from electricity and diesel operation. Here you also have to keep one more thing in mind, that because in many of the states the electricity is provided at a very cheap or almost free rates, that is where in the evenings many of the farmers, they simply switch the tube wells on. They will leave it throughout the night, and in the early hours of the morning, that is, they will switch it off. Now, that not only creates a kind of a depletion of the groundwater level, it also makes your soil saline and infertile. So that is why you need to have a sustainable method of irrigation whereby the groundwater is also not depleted. So in order to achieve all these processes and all these purposes at the same time, the government had thought about this PM Kusum Yojana, whereby the solar panels would be installed and these solar panels would operate these electric motors and pumps which would extract water and spray it all over. In a way, these solar panels will not only remove the requirement of the electricity that the state government is providing, at the same time, these solar panels will generate enough electricity that it can be provided back to the state grid, and the state's overall capacity to produce renewable energy, that also will increase. So because of these necessities, the PM Kusum Yojana has been introduced. Now, after this was introduced, this has also been in presence in various state governments. For example, if you take a look at the Chhattisgarh government had launched its own scheme on the similar lines, and that was the Saur Sujal Yojana. Saur Sujal Yojana. This was launched by the Chhattisgarh government, state government. So wherever any state government launches a scheme which is going to significantly help provision of food or rations or maybe education or agriculture, you need to keep that in mind for providing that as an example. So Saur Sujal Yojana, provided or initiated by the Chhattisgarh government, also was for the same purpose. Now here, the need for the scheme. So India has close to around 30 million agricultural pumps, that is close to around 3 crore agricultural pumps, out of which 22 million are electric and 8 million are diesel operated. Now, electricity for agriculture is highly subsidized, and oftentimes they are termed as the main cause for rapid groundwater depletion and poor financial position of DISCOMs. What do we mean by DISCOMs here? DISCOMs here refer to distribution companies. Distribution companies. Very good. Now, these distribution companies are the ones where after the power is generated, they carry out and they basically distribute it amongst the users. So most of the distribution companies across the country, they are operating under heavy losses because of the fact that they are not able to provide power at the rate that it should be provided. They provide it at a much cheaper rate and they incur the losses significantly. So because of the huge amount of energy provided to this agricultural sector, these DISCOMs are running at huge losses, significant losses. And believe it or not, most of you would have studied it in the portion of the economic survey as well. Majority of the bad loans that you see in the case of the various different public sector banks, majority of those bad loans are carried out by these DISCOMs who don't have any amount of money to pay back the loans that they have borrowed from the banking system as well. Annual electricity consumption for agriculture is close to around 200 billion units, which is 18% of the total energy and electricity consumption. The world is moving towards cleaner fuel. The world is moving towards cleaner energy. Can we as a nation, which is aspiring to be one of the global leaders for cleaner energy and to fight climate change, can we afford to produce energy in the same way that we have been doing so? Absolutely not. And also, remember, in India, till today, we have not achieved the capacity where we are going to be able to provide free or in a way reliable electricity, not free electricity, reliable 24/7 electricity across the country. Whichever city you are living in, whichever part of the country you are living in, you would not be able to say that in your area there is no power cut. So these 200 billion units, they are very, very precious. So in order to achieve that, this PM Kusum Yojana can come in handy. Now, if you take a look at this scheme, now all this textual portion that I have provided here, guys, this is for your revision so that you can write a good answer. So the scheme aims to boost solar capacity to provide energy security to the Indian farmers. Now, please understand, when you are dependent in order to operate your pump or the tube well, if you are dependent upon the electricity to be provided by the state, there are chances that there will be power cuts. There are chances that the frequency provided is not good. There are chances that the quality of electricity provided is not good, thereby destroying your machinery as well and providing that unpredictability. But imagine if you as a farmer, you have your own solar panel, you won't be dependent on the state government at all. In fact, you as a farmer will be providing that excess electricity back to the electrical grid, and you can be able to earn, you shall be able to earn some amount of income or revenue yourself. So this can become an additional source of income. In the era when we are consistently talking about doubling of farm income, this can significantly help the farmers in our country. Now, the scheme at the same time helps in achieving the aim by increasing India's share of solar power generation. It consists of three major components. Component A focuses on installation of 10,000 megawatt of solar capacity by setting up small power plants of capacity 2 megawatt. These power plants will be set up by the farmers, panchayats, cooperatives, farmer producer organizations, etc., in the vast quantum of barren land that we have. Component B, what it will do is it will emphasize on the installation of standalone solar powered agricultural pumps. 20 lakh, that is 2 million individual solar power pumps. Under this component, the government will support individual farmers in setting up those basic pumps. And under component C, the government will work for the solarization of 15 lakh grid connected agricultural pumps, which are connected by the grid, which are operating on the electricity. Now these pumps shall be the source of electricity for the grid. So imagine the condition of electrical supply in our country, how reliable it will be. And in a way, and in a time, at a time when India is trying to achieve the clean energy standard and status, this becomes very relevant. So what are the objectives of this scheme? Again, I have listed it down. You can take it up, you can revise it up from the PPT itself, more than sufficient. So promote decentralized solar power production, reduce the transmission losses that happen in the case of electrical supply runs into various farmlands, there will be transmission losses. So when you have your own individual supply at the solar pump or the solar panel, then automatically no issues will arise. Now, support the financial health of the distribution companies, help states meet the renewable purchase obligations, because each of the states, they have their own targets, right? That this much amount of renewable energy you have to utilize. Many of them, they are unable to utilize that much. Many of them, they are not buying that much of renewable energy. So in this way, they can meet their RPO obligation as well. And then promote energy efficiency and water conservation, provide water security to farmers as well, provide reliable power to utilize the irrigational facilities, and fill the void in the solar power production. Because what do we mean when we talk about filling the void? Please understand, we have been setting up very large power plants, solar power plants, in the past 10 years. In various different states, be it Madhya Pradesh, be it even the region of Tamil Nadu, be it the region of Karnataka, be it the region of Rajasthan, Gujarat, you will come across endless news stories where very large solar power plants have been set up. At the same time, in order to achieve better clean energy status, many of the various different houses, they are operating rooftop solar panels, right? They are installing solar panels on their rooftop itself in order to achieve sustainability. So you have very large production in the power plants and you have individual sustainability in the rooftop solar. This can provide, that is the PM Kusum Yojana, can fill the gap in between, so that a large section of the agricultural community, which is a significant chunk, they will be served by this. So these are the objectives of the scheme. Mostly, it will help you achieve sustainability. That is very, very relevant. So what is the way forward in this case? What is it that the government should be doing in order to make this plan a success, or this scheme a success? So first of all, here, cheaper solar panels. Now, how do we get that? Here, when we say cheaper solar panels, that will happen only when we have domestic production. As of now, if you take a look at the solar panels that we have in our country, it is mostly Basically, when we say made in India, these solar panels are made in India, that is the assembly work which is done. Most of the individual components, they are imported from countries such as China. So that is why the basic cost is still very high. That needs to go much cheaper. Then, other than that, better connectivity. Connectivity to the grid. Okay? Then, after that, economic incentive to the farmer. Right? See, as long as you don't tell a farmer that this is the amount of money that you can earn by implementing this, most of them won't be attracted to it. So you need a perfect and a sure shot economic model in order to operate this, right? So that is why here you need to provide that economic incentive and also integration with state operated schemes. How can this provide reliable water to the farmers? Because see, if the electricity supplied by the state that is fluctuating and it is unreliable, then obviously water extraction will be unreliable. But if you have your own solar operated pump, you can operate it anytime, anywhere. So you have a reliability of the access of water. So state operated schemes, in many of the cases, they run parallel with the central government scheme, and neither one is implemented nor the other. So wherever, in whichever state you have a similar scheme, there has to be an integration. We do know that in the fractured polity of the country that we see today, that is very, very difficult. But that is where the role of the bureaucrats come into the play, where the bureaucrats have to work, as well as the political leaders have to work in order to integrate the scheme, in order to have a better outcome associated. Okay? Now, after this, we have the question associated. Discuss the importance of PM Kusum in helping India achieve sustainability in agriculture and renewable energy simultaneously. This is a 10 mark or a 150 word question, answer that you have to write. So in the introduction, what will you write? This is something which is very important to understand, guys, because many of the times we know the answer, but we don't know what do we have to write in the introduction, body, and conclusion. So in the introduction, you will write about the scheme. About the scheme. Right? Then in the body, here you will write the objectives or the need for the scheme. Right? Then after that, how sustainability will be provided. Right? Then after that, renewables. Right? And then eventually, after this, you have to talk about the scheme, objectives of the scheme in brief, very brief. Right? Very brief. And then conclusion about the necessity of it and the way forward. So that is where you can write it in the conclusion, and you will easily get, if it is a 10 marker question, you will easily get around 5 to 5.5 in this answer. Okay? Now, then we come to the third topic of the day, again related to your portion of environment and ecology. That is Yaya So in the region of Ladakh. So here refers to a lake, right? In the local lingo, So refers to a lake. So you have Pangong So, So Muriri, and so on. All these are basically lakes. So that becomes Ladakh's first bioheritage site. This topic, by the way, which we are going to discuss for your mains purpose, this is also going to be relevant for your prelims. Okay? Prelims also, it is going to be very relevant, as well as for your mains exam. Okay? administrator, yes, it will be considered a freebie, my dear friend. Okay. Now, then here, basically, if you take a look at it, Yayaso is a high altitude lake which is present in the region of Ladakh, the Union Territory of Ladakh. Now, why this becomes relevant is you have a lot of migratory species of birds, particularly during the various different months of the year. They do come over to this region in order to have a better condition. When the conditions in the northern portion of the world that becomes very harsh, many of the migratory species, they do come here in order to have accessibility to food for reproduction cycles and so on. So that is why these high altitude lakes, they become very pristine areas of biodiversity conservation. So here, if you take a look at the background of it and the context very briefly, basically Yayaso, known as bird's paradise, so automatically it attracts a lot of birds in this region because obviously fresh water. Located at an altitude of close to around 5,000 meters above sea level, has been proposed as a biodiversity heritage site. Now, this site will have an approximate area of 60 square kilometer, which will also include the lake's watershed, the entire area. And it is why it is important. It is relevant because it is a nesting habitat for a lot of birds and animals, such as the bar-headed goose, right? Black-necked crane, and Brahmini duck that you have, and also has the distinction of being one of the highest breeding sites, right? The reproduction cycle that I talked about for the black-necked crane in India. So understand the importance of it. Very, very relevant in order to conserve the biodiversity of the region. So that is why the portion of biodiversity heritage site comes into the picture. So this particular portion will be relevant for your prelims. Okay, so think about it. When you are going to revise about it, revise it particularly well. It is going to be relevant for your prelims. Now, biodiversity heritage sites. Let us take a brief look into that. What are they? Why are they established? And under provisions of which law, or which act rather, are they established? So what are they? These are basically very well defined areas which have unique, ecologically fragile ecosystems, which also have high diversity of wild and domesticated species, presence of rare and threatened species, as well as certain keystone species. So that automatically becomes biodiversity heritage. So in certain areas, for example, you have very unique kind of vegetation. You have very unique kind of sacred groves which are present. That is designated as a biodiversity heritage site. So under which act is an area declared as a biodiversity heritage site? It is under Biological Diversity Act 2002. Under Section 37 of Biodiversity Act 2002, the state government may, from time to time, and in the consultation of the local bodies, that is the biodiversity management committees that you have at the local level. So the state government will be consulting them, will have an interaction with them, will take the feedback from them. And after that, they notify in the official gazette again areas of biological importance under this particular act. That is what is declared as a biodiversity heritage site. Now, the establishment of this heritage site will or can impose limitations on these heritage sites, and basically here they are clearly defined areas which can also include water bodies. So for example, coastal ecosystems, inland waters, marine ecosystems, all those areas can be designated. They have a rich biodiversity and may include any of the following elements that you see listed. Either it can have wild and domesticated species, species variation, genetic diversity that we talk about, functional biodiversity that we talk about, existence of keystone species. What do we mean by keystone species? Keystone species are those particular species whose survivability and existence becomes very, very important for the survivability of the entire ecosystem. For example, if you consider tigers, right? Tigers are considered to be a keystone species. Why? Because if the tigers they disappear, then the herbivore population in that particular region, that is the deers, etc., that will go up exponentially. Now these deers, if there is no predator to feed on them, their population, when it rises, increases, they will graze on almost all the grasses which are available. So the ecosystem will not be able to produce at such a speed at the rate at which it will be consumed. So the ecosystem in itself might collapse. That is why we always say it is very, very important to conserve and save the tigers. So these tigers, for example, that will form the keystone species. Okay. Now, wild relatives of various different domesticated or cultivated species, then land acres or variations, they are present fossilized remains of biological components, a region having important cultural or aesthetic value. We will take a look at such region as an example as well. Then basically areas which have a variety of natural, semi-natural or artificial habitats which are very, very relevant in order to preserve the biodiversity. Areas where you have a lot of domesticated biodiversity, important cultural spaces like sacred groves. What do we mean by sacred groves here, guys? So these are those regions where you have a lot of mangroves which are considered to be sacred under the local traditions and local customs, and you worship them. Right? So you revere them. So that is why sacred groves, as well as other sizable community preserved areas that can also be declared as a BHS. Locations, even very small one, even though it is an urban green space area, wherever you have the threatened and the local indigenous wildlife which is present, those areas can also be described or discussed under BHS, notified under BHS. Now, as much as possible, the effort is that when you are designating an area as a biodiversity heritage site, the effort is that it should be a new area which has to be brought under protection. The existing area or the area which is already protected, be it as a national park, be it as a wildlife sanctuary, etc., so those areas don't need further protection. But those areas which are not included under, let's say, the provisions of Wildlife Protection Act 1972, under the aegis of which you have the establishment of national parks and wildlife sanctuaries, those areas in particular will be protected, and that is where this comes into relevance. Areas where seasonal migrant animals, this is something which you observe in the case of Yayaso. Right? Then conservation zones for medicinal plants. So as you can see, you have a host of conditions which can be kept in mind for any area to be designated as a BHS or a biodiversity heritage site. Examples of them, you have the example of the first biodiversity site in the country, that is the Nallur Tamarind Grove in Karnataka. It is the first BHS in India, important for your prelims. Okay, it is located in Bangalore, and it is popularly believed to be a relic of the Chola dynasty that ruled nearly 800 years ago and more. So here you will have a lot of groves. If you go into this area, you will have a lot of sacred groves in that region. Along with that, in the midst of that, you will also find beautifully sculpted older relics in the form of structures. That is a kind of a temple formation. Temple is also in existence in this region, where you have very beautifully sculpted walls in that region. So that entire area in the region of Devanahalli, the entire area has been designated as a bioheritage site, right? Along with it, another example, again in the case of Karnataka itself, in Chikmagalur in Karnataka, you will find Hogrekan. That has also been designated as a biodiversity heritage site. Why? Because this area has a very unique shola vegetation. What are shola vegetation that you have? When we talk about shola vegetation, Where do you find Shola vegetation? In the region of prominently the Nilgiri ranges and also in the southern part of the Western Ghats. What are these? Sholas are basically temperate evergreen forests in a way that you find across the mountain slopes in the higher altitude. So grasslands with several floral species that are very unique and have a lot of medicinal value. Hogrekan also serves as a wildlife corridor between Kudremukh and Bhadra Wildlife Sanctuary. Bhadra Wildlife Sanctuary you will also study, where you have a significant amount of tiger population. So tiger population is very significant in the Bhadra region. And Kudremukh, which is an iron ore dominated area, that is also significantly dominated or is present in the region of Western Ghats. It has got a huge significantly amount of biodiversity present. So this Hogrekan region provides a connectivity to that. So that is where the biodiversity heritage sites, they become relevant. So when YAYASO is declared, you also need to understand what this biodiversity heritage site is, when is it that an area is designated as a biodiversity heritage site, and what are the provisions included. Okay? As I told you earlier itself, this particular topic is more also relevant for your prelims. Now, the question that you can expect from this area: what are the geoheritage as well as the bioheritage sites? Here we'll talk about bioheritage sites. So in this case, we'll talk about what are bioheritage sites, discuss the characteristics and relevance in the process of conservation. So again, another 10 mark 150 worded answer that is required here. Here you have to first of all define that bioheritage. You will find that in the PPT itself it is given. What are the characteristics? The characteristics we have talked about, the conditions we have talked about under which it will be designated, all that you have to write. And here the important part that you see is the relevance in the process of conservation. What will be the relevance? So we have talked about that these are areas uniquely, which in most of the cases, not in all the cases, in many of the cases, these areas are not protected under Wildlife Act of 1972. So that increases the ambit of conservation. It also raises awareness level. It is also used for medicinal values. It is also used significantly in order to augment research activities. So all these activities, when they happen, conservation will automatically improve. Okay? Then, after this, we come to the penultimate or the second last topic of the day, and that is about ChatGPT, artificial intelligence, and the ethical challenges that confront us all due to this ChatGPT. Okay, I'm sure many of you have been or would have used this ChatGPT already and would be significantly and thoroughly impressed with it. So ChatGPT, how many of us have used it here till now? Yes, many of you would be using it for your studies as well. So this ChatGPT, by the way, uh, this ChatGPT can also create certain answers for you. But I hope you are not writing answers based on ChatGPT. You are writing answers on your own, but otherwise it can also be created to write subjective answers to the subjective questions that you have. Nonetheless, here we are going to talk about ChatGPT. Most of you us are aware about it, but mostly we are going to talk about the challenges which have been thrown in the spanner immediately after this ChatGPT has become a kind of a common household name. There are many ethical challenges which confront us. So that is where it becomes relevant for your mains examination. So what is ChatGPT? ChatGPT is basically an AI enabled, that is, AI means artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence enabled chatbot in a way. So AI enabled chatbot. Right? So here, this is an AI enabled chatbot. So obviously you feed in your question, or it is a kind of an interactive chatbot. It will also be able to interact with you. For example, if you ask them any question regarding 2023, they will tell you that my data is only up till 2021. Ask me up till about 2021. So it is an interactive one, and it gives you the most relevant answers to it. So while it has taken the entire world stage by a storm, so to say, but overall, if you will observe, it is a kind of a generative pre-trained transformer. It is a pre-trained, but at the same time, the more that you interact with this chat GPT bot, the more empowered it becomes, the more informative it becomes. So the evolution of this chat GPT platform, that is going to happen, and it is going to become much better and much different. 1 year down the line or 2 years down the line, it is going to be much more different than what we see today. On the face of it, yes, there are criticisms that it is going to curb creativity, it is going to create a lot of job losses, etc., that we are going to discuss. But this is where artificial intelligence, that the entire world had been warned about and is being warned about continuously, this is where artificial intelligence is taking shape right in front of our very own eyes. Now, it is a large scale neural network based language model which has been developed by OpenAI. Now, neural network means basically that it will not only be providing you answers, it will be taking feedback as well. And there's an interconnectivity. That means the feedback that you provide, let's say sitting in Kolkata, feedback that somebody provides, let's say from Washington, D.C. in United States, all of that will be processed by this bot, and eventually it will evolve accordingly. Now, the GPT models are trained on vast amount of text and information, that is the data, to generate human-like responses. And this only evolves with time. This only gets better with time. The chatbot was also trained using RLHF, that is reinforcement learning from human feedback. Now, you would also have come across the fact that now ChatGPT, it is operated by OpenAI, and it has been launched by Microsoft, you would be aware. Now, Google had also launched its own AI platform recently. What is the name of it? What is the name of the platform or the app, the AI app that is launched by Google? Beautiful. It is Bard, right? So Google has basically launched Bard as a result of it. Now, why am I talking about Bard here? We were talking about ChatGPT. First of all, that Bard is also very similar in activity, but the performance standards have been very much poor. In fact, when Bard was released by Google, if you have been following the news headlines, the stock prices, the performance of Bard was so poor that the stock prices of Alphabet, which is the parent company of Google, that immediately tanked. And Alphabet lost billions of dollars in the stock market the day Bard was inaugurated or launched. On the day when Google was expecting to rake in lot and huge amount of income and revenue, that is the day that Google made a lot of losses in the past couple of weeks. Now, that was because Bard is not operating at the same level as ChatGPT. Bard is not able to provide the same level of responses. And again, I will take you to the recent developments at Google, where in the past couple of days, the head, that is Sundar Pichai at Google, he has written to all his employees that spend at least around 4 hours of your daily time. The Google employees, they have been asked to spend 4 hours of their daily time on Bard. Why? Because Bard also operates on reinforcement learning from human feedback. That is, the more that it is operated, the better it will become. Right? Now, please understand, the same kind of activity is used by almost all the various different instruments. Excuse me. Almost all the various instruments, all the various machineries, wherever you have machine learning, where the machine can evolve about the over the understanding that it has received. In all those areas, you have the same kind of a learning. In fact, if you talk about even electric cars such as Tesla, where you have auto drive functioning, right? So in Tesla cars, I hope that we are aware that you have a kind of an AI based riding system as well. That is also a neural network based model. So almost all of them have a similar model in their framework and their architectural framework. So that is why Bard is also a work in progress. Chat GPT is also a work in progress. It is going to become much more informative, much more representative, and much more human like going ahead 2 to 3 years into the future. Now, here, this brings about certain ethical concerns to the picture. What ethical concerns? So, when we talk about ethical concerns here, first of all, AI is a technology designed by humans to replicate, augment, or replace human intelligence. But then, AI does not have a kind of a limitation factor, does it? In the case of human thinking, yes, human thinking is much more evolved, but AI is a machine that learns on a minute to minute, second to second basis. It does not sleep, it does not rest. It will learn continuously from across the globe. Then these tools, they typically rely on large volumes of various types of data to develop the information that they have. Now, poorly designed projects built on the data that is faulty, inadequate, or biased can have potentially disastrous consequences. Let me give you an example. Suppose I ask the chat GPT bot eventually, well, let's say when it evolves significantly, I ask it to write a mail for me or write a kind of a particular code for me. It generates a code. I can use it for any purpose. That code can have multiple implications as well. So that is where it presents to the world a kind of an ethical challenge in front of it. Moreover, the rapid advancement in algorithmic systems mean that in some cases it is not clear to us how the AI reached its conclusion. So we are essentially relying on the systems, the machine learning, and we can't explain to make decisions that can affect the society. Right? So, what the third sentence or the third point overall means is we have virtually no control to the extent that AI can go to. You cannot have the AI designated as a good system or a bad system. It is just meant to find solutions, right? So right now you might have a kind of a question posted on chat gpt, let's say, on how to make a bomb. Now, right now, chat gpt will tell you that it will not give you the information, but over a period of time, that kind of a questioning scenario that can be altered, augmented, and then if the AI starts giving out the results, imagine the disastrous consequences that potentially it can hold for the society. So that is something which we have to worry about, guys. Please understand, this is again, those of you who know Elon Musk and have been following entrepreneurs like him, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, all the internet moguls, they have been continuously warning us about the extent to which the AI or artificial intelligence can develop. Chat GPT is the real world manifestation in front of all of us. It has taken the world by storm. It has basically captured everyone's imagination and fantasies as of now, but you never know the extent that to which it can develop itself. Now, if we briefly point out certain concerns, now, malicious and dangerous coding. As I told you, certain codings can be provided by this chat gpt. Chat gpt, those of you who have not used it, please understand that sometimes you can get the codings from chat gpt itself. Now recently, chat gpt, and it has been found out that the basic level, the junior level, the entry level jobs of coders, developers, right, the testers, the technicians that you have in various software companies, that can very easily be done by chat gpt. While human based interactions that you talk about, let's say I have 4 employees. 4 employees, 4 coders who I have directly hired from college, right? They are 21, 22 years old. I tell them to work. Now they will have endless excuses that today I have a headache, today there is rainfall, today there is traffic, etc., etc., etc. Chat GPT will not have any such excuse. Chat GPT will furnish you the code within seconds, if not earlier than that. Now, when you have that amount of power in Chat GPT, now imagine that can be utilized by people with malicious intent. So this can be utilized in order to create code for cyber scam, phishing, mails, and notifications, etc. So in a way, it can be a kind of a facilitator for malicious content, which it should not ideally get entrapped in. Then, basically, here, fairness and biasness, that is something which needs to be talked about. Because Chat GPT's initial responses, they, in many of the areas, that has also become viral over a passage of time. In many of these areas, the responses generated by Chat GPT, they smack of racial kind of discrimination, right? Gender discrimination, racial discrimination, etc. That is something which is very apparent. And we know that in present day and age, the usage of computer systems is not what used to be 20, 25 years back. Now there has been a lot of democratization and decentralization for the usage of software products. So when you have young kids and young children being exposed to such kind of malicious, biased information, the long-term impact on society, long-term impact on society is significantly huge. Then, job losses. Job losses are going to be there. And there is almost no two ways about it. Everybody will agree that this AI, when it comes into play, when it is utilized significantly, many of the jobs, for example, let's say the call centers that you have, many of them will simply run out of business because the computer will have a much better ability to handle the queries and redirect the people accordingly. Right? The present day chatbots that you see in the case of various computer apps, which ideally earlier used to run on, let's say, customer care services. Now, these chatbots that you see, they are very rudimentary level. That if you have any complaint, do you want a refund or a replacement? That's it. That is their level of proficiency. Imagine if Chat GPT is used widely. Then basically many of the jobs, I told you about the coders, right? Coders, content creation, right? Then design, ideas, then call centers, right? Etc. Everything becomes and goes out of relevance. So we are staring at a humongous and a huge amount of job loss 2 to 3 years going ahead into the future. Then comes the major issue, plagiarism, right? You are simply copying the content which is present in the internet. Now please understand, let's suppose I am an individual researcher. I have carried out a research, right? Based upon that hard work and that research, I have put it on a website. Now that website, eventually if the AI, let's say 2 years down the line, if the AI over a period of time, it comes to know and it learns itself that it has to fetch data from wherever possible on the internet, if AI takes that data, then basically all the intellectual property, all the basic copyright issues, they will stand to be infringed. So that is where plagiarism also comes into play. Now, another more dangerous trend which is evolving is the various different examinations and the dangers associated. Now, here you might have a question that Chat GPT, if it helps me clear an examination, what are the dangers associated? Imagine you go to a hospital, right? Under dire circumstances, you go to a hospital to get a treatment. Later on, even if you don't realize it, you come to understand that the doctor who is going to treat you or the nurse who is going to treat you, they have not passed the exam, but they got that passing degree because of Chat GPT. Would you prefer to be examined or to be operated upon by that doctor? Absolutely no. Recently, we had a case, a much publicized case, where the Chat GPT was able to create or able to clear the college degree examination, the medical practitioner examination as well. And imagine a scenario where this is utilized in order to clear medical licensing exams. That will create a danger to the society. Now, that is something which you need to think about, right? Especially in the case of medical practitioners. Now, that is where you have the ethical challenges in front of us. So these are the concerns. But just pointing at concerns, that doesn't solve the purpose. What is the solution in front of us? The solution has to be to include within the machine learning, ML, I hope that we are aware, ML and AI, these are a branch of science which is referred to as artificial intelligence and machine learning. Wherever neural network and human interaction based feedback that is used, there you have the machine which learns automatically. So in the portion of machine learning, you have to ensure that ethical code of conduct that is included there necessarily, right? And every different organizations, they need to develop a standard operating procedure about the amount of access and the amount of utilization that they provide to Chat GPT. Imagine a large multinational corporation that gives Chat GPT almost an entire access to all its database, all its servers. Imagine the amount of information that it can retrieve. Imagine the dangers that befall in front of all of us if it is hacked. After all, it is an open source, isn't it? Now, open source can be hacked. So imagine the dangers in front of us. That is why we need what? Ethical code of conduct. Code of conduct. Then standard operating procedure, to be developed by organizations. And immediately, wherever there is any kind of a reply or an interaction which smacks of racial biasness or gender bias or whatsoever, immediately that needs to be flagged. So the feedback needs to be almost immediate and certain. So that is something we can do moving ahead into the future. But please understand, regardless of the concern that we are talking about, in no way is this a kind of a technology that, and you will find many of the people who are advocating the fact and advocating the argument that let's not use Chat GPT at all, let's phase it out of the world. The world was better when we simply had a wheel and a fire. What is this machine learning and artificial intelligence? That is not going to happen. Technology evolves itself. If not today, tomorrow, but AI is a reality in front of us. I hope that those of you who are aware enough, you have many different organizations which have been developing these AI bots. that is used in many of the instruments that you and we use on our daily basis, from your air conditioners to your washing machines to your television sets, many of them, to your internet searches that you carry out on your mobile phones. Everything is dominated by AI. So this AI is going to come. It is utilizable. It is something which is going to help us. How? By helping us democratize education, providing content at almost negligible rates, ensuring that business practices and business functionaries can run even in areas where you don't have manpower, ensuring medical facilities and medical information and input in those areas where you don't have or you have a shortage of staff. So all these are the areas where you can take the help of this chat GPT, but at the same time not without the ethical part of it. Okay, so here the way forward: increasing the learning base, being more inclusive, judicious use of the data that I talked about, the accessibility of the data that will be provided by the various organizations, responsible collection, management, and use of data. That is something which you can provide as a way forward. Now, the question: artificial intelligence tools like ChatGPT and Bard throw unique solutions to the global issues, but simultaneously hold multiple ethical challenges before us. So this kind of a statement like question you will find significantly to be present, particularly in paper 2 and paper 3. So you will find a lot of questions like this. Contextualize and analyze the statement in light of development of newer AI tools. So when you look at the term contextualize, so what do you have to do here? You have to basically provide the context of the above statement. Provision of context of the given statement. Generally, wherever you will find the term contextualize should be given in intro, should be provided in introduction. Okay, ideally should be provided in the portion of introduction itself. Okay, and after you have provided the introduction about what is the context that we are talking about, that the challenges and the solutions that ChatGPT has for the world. So analyze the statement in light of development of newer AI tools. So here you have to see in the statement you have both the things: unique solutions to the global issues, but simultaneously multiple ethical challenges. So your answer need not be, or should not rather be, only unidirectional, that you are talking only about challenges or you are talking only about solutions. You have to talk about both of them. So challenges which confront us, possibilities that are in front of us, and because it is a 250 word, you have enough scope to provide the way forward as well. And this is a kind of a question, guys, that this year, particularly those of you appearing in the examination this year, you can expect this question even in the essay paper and almost certainly in GS paper 3 for your maths exam. Okay? Now, then coming to the last topic of the day, that is IISER Pune's new material removes pollutant from water. Now, contextualized MISBA basically refers to providing a context, right? Under which context has this statement been discussed? That is contextualized. So that is something you have to talk about. Okay. So IISER Pune's new material removes pollutants from water. So obviously, this is something which talks about water pollution, and solution. Okay. Now, when we talk about water pollution, first of all, look at the associated image. I'm sure, regardless of whichever part of the country that we belong from, north, south, east, west, central part of the country, this is an image almost all of us would have come across. Nowhere, in no part of the country can we claim that in my region, in my state, water pollution is not present. So water pollution is an ever prevalent issue, an ever prevalent problem confronting all of us. Now, because of the pollution of water, first of all, please understand, water is very, very important for human survivability. That is why almost all the civilizations that you see, be it the Mesopotamian, the Egyptian, the Harappan, or the Indus Valley civilization, all of them have developed where? On the banks of the rivers. The Mesopotamian civilization developed on the banks of Euphrates and Tigris, the Egyptian on the banks of River Nile, Harappan on the banks of River Indus. So water has always been important for domestic consumption, for also utilization for agriculture, for utilization for the animals that you rear as well. Now, when this water gets polluted, this water will have both organic waste and inorganic waste. Okay. Now, these can be toxic in nature. Toxic means these can be harmful for us. Now, when you consume that water or use that water, let's say for irrigation or for animals, etc., it can slowly and steadily build up in our system. The pollutants, the toxicants that we have, they can slowly and steadily build up in our own system. Now, many of the times, these pollutants, they consist of certain materials such as even antibiotics, right? And we don't know about it, but we keep on consuming that water, and eventually you will find that what it and how it manifests itself, particularly in the region of Delhi NCR, this is something that is an ever prevalent scenario in our country. Slowly and steadily, you will find that the medicines which used to work for you 5 years ago are not working for you anymore. You need to take a higher level of antibiotics. Now, you might be wondering that I have never consumed so many medicines. So how is it that the microbes have developed a resistance to antibiotics? In many of the cases, continuously, when you take in that water along with it brings about a level of contaminant or a toxicant, and that builds up in your system. That is something that you also would have studied under the portion of bioaccumulation. NCR means National Capital Region, Delhi National Capital Region. Bioaccumulation and bioaugmentation. Or not bioaugmentation, rather. Apologies. This is biomagnification. Now, in this, what happens is that basically the pollutants, their concentration increases in the food chain and within various different organisms. Now, where is it that the water is polluted from? Obviously, mostly from us humans. So, based upon the pollution that is carried out in water, I hope that we are aware that we have a broader classification as point sources for pollution and non-point sources of pollution. I will just write it down, but I hope we have this much amount of idea. We have the pollutants are divided into point sources and you have non-point sources. Now, what are these point sources and non-point sources? Point sources, for example, you have an industry. From that, the industrial effluent is given directly into the river, hot water, polluted water. So that will be a point source. On the other hand, let's suppose you have a river which is moving in this region. On the sides of it, in the entirety of the area, let's suppose you have farmlands. And in all these farmlands, because urea is so very cheap, you have put in so much amount of urea, and because electricity is almost free, so from the tube well you have extracted the groundwater, and all that urea has come into that river. So what this becomes, The pollution is not happening from one point. It is a non-point source, agricultural fields. So here example becomes industrial waste. Industrial waste. And here becomes agricultural sources. Also, particularly in our country, rivers and river banks, I hope we are all aware that it is widely used as one of the largest toilet systems across the globe. So our river banks, you will have early in the morning, you will have a lot of people having their own contribution that they make to these river banks, and they provide that nutrient to that river bank. So all those, they are under the categories, the sewage, excreta, etc., which is passed on, all that comes under the portion of non-point sources. Now, because of this, you have the pollutants which continue. Now, over a period of time, there have been various different solutions which have been provided in order to take care of this water pollution. One of the solutions that almost all of us, you ask anybody, any individual walking on the street, that, okay, look, this is the reason for water pollution, what should I do to stop it? Everybody will say that, look, wherever the pollutants are coming from, identify them, take care of them, there will be no water pollution anymore. But is that a solution that we can implement? For example, when we take care of, or when we take the case of a region, I will give you the example of river Ganga. Now, river Ganga has got a lot of pollutant. Now, one of the important cities on the banks of river Ganga is the city of Kanpur. Kanpur has got a lot of leather tanneries and leather industries. Now, these leather tanneries and industries, they discharge a humongous amount of polluted water into the river Ganga. So if I provide you the solution that shut down the leather factories there, open them somewhere else, first of all, who will give the money? And what about the job losses that will happen? What about the larger impact on economy that will happen? So obviously, closing down is not an option. So the other option, why don't we install filters? Right? Let's install filters so that the water which is flowing, and it is logically very easy to think that if water is flowing through here, I will install a filter here, whereby the pollutants will be trapped on one side and clean water will go on the other side. So that will also free the water of the pollutants. But the issue here is that time and time again, lot of pollutants will jam the entire filtration system and water flow will almost cease to exist. So that is where ISCR Pune has come up with a newer material. Now, this newer material, it acts like a sponge. Almost all of us would have seen sponge, played with sponges across our lives. Now, these sponges, you'll find these have very tiny pores, right, through which water can be absorbed and can be released as well. So the new material that they have developed, that has got its construction very similar to that of a sponge. Now, the beautiful part about it, associated with it, is that while that sponge-like material which has been made, which has been invented in a way, that newer material, not only does it absorb significant amount of impurities, in a very short span of time, it will trap the impurities, the toxic materials. At the same time, please understand, it will not lower the flow of water. That is, the flow of water will continue at the same rate while the impurities will be stopped. So that is the beauty of it. So that is why this has got humongous amount of implications, humongous amount of applications as well in the day-to-day functioning of our society. So access to clean and drinkable water has become a global issue now. Water contamination is one of the world's leading causes of death, and the problem is only getting worse. To tackle this, the team, it is not my team, it is the team at ISCR Pune, came up with a particularly custom designed unique molecular sponge-like material where you have multiple pores, right? Presence of multiple pores and ionic organic framework. Ionic means you have the development of charge across these pores, which can swiftly clean polluted water by soaking up the contaminant. Sinister means something which is not for constructive purpose. So all the toxicants and contaminants can be trapped by this. Now, basically, before I talk about the development of it, just to give you an idea of the image, this is what we are talking about here. This that you see, this is the structure which has been developed. If you analyze this structure, you will be able to observe multiple small tiny pores. Now, in each of these individual areas, you will observe, suppose I consider this area, it will have a unique lattice like structure, right, where you have the development of various charges. If you will be able to observe here, these will develop positive, negative charges, right? So the positive charges that you see in light blue color, these small that you see, these are positive charges. So what these positive charges do, they present a kind of a positive, means cation, right? Cation and anion, you would have read in your class 7th level chemistry. Positive is cation, negative is anion. So basically, these positive charges very minutely, they develop across these micropores. And when the contaminant is made to pass through this structure, all the contaminants, they automatically get associated with these positive charges. They get hooked on to these charges, and the water which is released is cleaner. So that is the basic aspect of the material which has been developed. Now, this material is macroionic viologen organic framework. Now, what is this viologen? Again, it is a kind of a chemical which carries out oxidation and reduction at the same time. So, and thereby it is generally found to have the presence of a halide ion or a halon such as chloride, etc. So that is what is referred to as a viologen. You don't need to get into the detail of it. So basically what has been done till now, that is something you need to understand. So basically they prepared a new material, that is IVOFM, right? So viologen unit grafted organic framework. Now, how has this been developed? How you develop this kind of a sponge-like structure with so many pores, microscopic pores? So, a charged porous organic polymer as a sponge-like framework is grown on a silica nanoparticle. So you have the presence of silica. What is silica? Silica is SiO2, right? So you have the silica, and in that you have this basic porous organic polymer that has got a sponge like structure that develops in the presence of the silica nanoparticles. After this, slowly and steadily, the silica nanoparticles are removed to create a kind of an ordered pore which is present, right? So here I will take you back to the image. So here what you observe, with the help of the presence of heat, application of heat, etc., this white that you observe, this white that you observe, this is basically silica, right? And this what you observe, this is the polymer. Polymer. So eventually, that is how you develop the entire material. Then one by one, you basically end up removing them in areas where they need to be removed. And when you have removed them, then you have the existence or the creation of this pore-like structure. And eventually, each of these pores that you have, they will have their own unique structure of a viologen, and that is where it will develop a positive charge on the nodes. So any contaminant which passes through, so the size and the number of micropores along with the strong electrostatic interaction of the IVOFM can remove the toxic pollutants from the water. And please understand, does not disturb the flow. Okay, for all of you who are getting confused regarding the structure, how it is created, let me be very blunt, very frank, and very clear with you. UPSC is never going to ask you about the chemical reaction for the formation of halogen, right? So from the examination perspective, how do you approach this? Here, you have to understand that basically a polymer, imagine there is a kind of a polymer which is developed on a silica bed, and there the silica is appearing in various different areas. Then, by some chemical reaction or the other, you remove the silica, leaving behind a sponge like material. That sponge like material will absorb the contaminants, allowing the water to flow, thereby ensuring purification and cleaning of water. That is the basic part of it. All this that you see revolves around that basic one sentence part. Okay, so Viologen unit grafted organic framework, that is IVOFEM, is a unique molecular sponge like. So this is the description, the to clean polluted water by soaking up the contaminants in it. Now there are carcinogenic pollutants. Carcinogenic means cancer causing. Cancer causing, right? That are removed using various different methods of electrostatic precipitation, of sorbent methods which absorb the pollutants, etc. But they have hardly been effective till now. What this IVOFM does, it employs the electrostatics where I told you that they develop positive charge. Let us take a look. So they combine with nanometer sized micropores, the small pores, and specific binding sites for the targeted pollutants. So inherent cationic nature means positive ions, right? Allows fast diffusion of pollutants, whereby more than 93% removal in less than 30 seconds. 93% of the contaminants are removed in less than 30 seconds. Imagine that, process that, and then think about it. Unlike normal materials, this material is found to be very selective towards toxic pollutants, that it will, regardless of the number of pollutants which are present, the toxic materials will always be absorbed within the material, thereby ensuring that there is no blockage whatsoever. The utility of it, when tested for wide array of water pollutants, it showed ultra fast capture of all the pollutants, both organic and inorganic, with over 93% removal in only 30 seconds. Among all the tested pollutants, the material showed significant removal of various different antibiotics such as sulfur dimethoxine antibiotic from water almost completely. Now, this significantly impacts the plants, the animals, and the humans as well. So, that is why this can be very, very relevant and handy, particularly where still we don't have drinking water supply to all of us. So while this particular topic, guys, I will again simplify it. All those getting confused that he said something about chloride halogen, don't get confused in that, because even if you are well versed in organic chemistry, you have read all the good books in organic chemistry, still you will find this to be very, very difficult. So that is why, understand it very simply, a newer material has been developed. How has it been developed and why it has been developed? So newer material, right? A newer material has been developed. How or why? For, so first, if we talk about the why of it, to take away the pollutants from water. By what mechanism? Just like a sponge operates. So I hope that we are aware how, let's say I have a sponge bar, so to say. Now that sponge, how it operates, it takes in materials endlessly. So something on a similar mechanism, it will take it contaminant and allow the water to pass away. Why will it take the contaminant only? Why not anything else? Because of the development of charge. and that charge will hook on to the atoms and the molecules of the contaminant, and this contaminant will stick here and the rest of the water will flow. Another molecule of a contaminant is coming, it will stick somewhere else. So because you have so many small pores, almost 93 or 95% of the contaminant is trapped almost instantaneously. So that is the why of it. Now, how this newer material has been developed? It has been developed with the help of a new uh, polymer, in a way, which is developed on the base of silica. Now that silica is removed eventually by the reduction reaction, and that is how wherever that silica particle is removed from, there you will have gap. So that gap serves as the pore that will trap the pollutant, and that is how eventually you achieve purification. Use of it for drinking water purposes, for various supply purposes, this can be of significant use. So that is where this newer material can significantly revolutionize how we use water and provision of clean and safe drinking water to the population. Okay? That is all that you need to know about the topic. So, what are the measures to mitigate the pollution of fresh water? Here, you can talk about various things such as taking care of the effluent systems, etc., having better machineries, ensuring that the river systems are away from human contribution that we do on everyday early morning. So, such kind of things you can automatically quote, but discuss the role of the IVOFM technology in order to achieve the same. So, this is a 10 marker. Very briefly, draw the rough image of it, talk about the when and the how and the why of it, more than sufficient, and you can easily write an answer out of it. Okay? Misbah, what the sponge absorb clean water or polluted water? They will absorb the pollutant out of the polluted water, and the water which will be given will be cleaner. Okay? Now, okay, I'll be taking a few questions. So, right. Uh, can it remove big pollutants like plastic waste? See, if anything can remove micro pollutants, obviously the larger ones, they won't be able to move through it, can it? So imagine if I have a filtration system. Here, small molecules are captured. Can you imagine what will happen to a larger plastic which is going to pass through? Obviously, it will be blocked. Okay, difference between bioaccumulation and biomagnification. See, the difference is very basic. I remember I covered it in last month's webinar or the previous month's webinar as well. So nonetheless, bioaccumulation is, I'll give you with the help of an example. Suppose I grow a crop of a certain crop, let's say wheat, maize, anything that has got some amount of contaminant. I consume it, right? Some amount of contaminant comes into my system as well. I keep on consuming it. Eventually, the contaminant level will go up. So, in my body, the contaminants are accumulating. That is bioaccumulation. Then, what is biomagnification? So, suppose that contaminant goes into water. That water will have many of the small planktons, they will consume those contaminants. Each of them will consume small amount of contaminant, but one fish will come and will consume lot of these small planktons, right? So the contaminant level in that fish will increase further. Then one larger fish will come, it will consume all the small fishes. So the contaminant level keeps on increasing. So as you move across the food chain, the contaminant level is ever increasing. That is biomagnification. So that is the difference. Okay? Right? How those larger pollutants obviously will be stopped, my dear friend. If the smaller pollutants are stopped, why not the larger pollutants? Will appeal? No, that is the very unique factor of this, that because you have these particles which develop some charge, eventually you will need to replace the material after a long time, but it will not block the flow of water. Okay. Kapil, some suggestions on from your side on prelims geography. So I hope we will be interacting again either on the app or on YouTube. But nonetheless, for geography, I would suggest to you, if you are reading it for, and if you are appearing for the prelims exam, please understand portions such as climatology, portions such as Indian monsoon, agriculture, the crop types, etc. That is something which should be almost on your tongue in terms of the basic concept. It should be very clear, right? Then take a look at the other topics and look at current affairs, my dear friends. Current affairs, if there have been water storage structures in use, look at those, right? So even though I have a high kind of an intuition that those water storage structures, etc., won't be asked this year, but still look at all the current affairs and the related peripheral areas in the basic portion, climatology, in Indian portion, Indian monsoon, agriculture. This is something that you have to necessarily read about. Okay. Okay, so that is going to be all for today. I hope this session was something which was meaningful to you guys and something has been extracted from it. I urge all of you, please try to write an answer, regardless of even if you score zero. Please don't worry about it as long as you are improving at the end of it. Please try to write an answer, send it to us for evaluation. Any of your questions, if has remained unanswered, please don't worry. Mail it to us. We will get back to you very soon. So that was all from my side. Till we meet again, do take care of yourself, do take care of your health. Goodbye. Thank you and good night.